So, I just let me tell you briefly what I'm expecting. I guess that's a wrong word to use, but what I was thinking about with the podcast is I wanted to kind of have a conversation with people in the industry that are into the video game development, and I stumbled upon you guys coincidentally, and shot you guys an email, and you got back to me, so that's great. Here we are. Um, but I just wanted to have a conversation with you guys. Just how you guys got into game development.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good.
All right. Well, let's start off right there. How did you guys get into the game development?
So I'm the programmer of the pair. I started doing, I guess I was doing like little stuff on my calculator at high school and things like that. And I kind of liked programming a bit, but at that point, never knew it would actually be a thing to do. Games would, that would be a real
Right.
thing I could do. And then I studied engineering, kind of electronic and electrical and all these other kind of weird engineering things that I didn't like at all. And then I changed to computer science because the programming part was really the only thing I liked. And about that time, I was also doing these weird little adventure games because I found this program called Adventure Game Studio where you could basically just draw a bit of background art for a point and click adventure game and make a character and then make it so the kind of character could walk behind things in the scene and stuff like that, and make little puzzles. And I wasn't an artist at all, but I took like photos with a digital camera, a really crappy like 1.3 megapixel digital camera that I was like really, really proud of, and like put my house in it and made this little adventure game with my house in it. So that was my first kind of little adventure game thing. And it was a really good community, the Adventure Game Studio community, like really supportive and like getting people excited about making games. And so that was my first taste of game development. I really liked that. So after I finished computer science, and then I thought, it's probably pretty unlikely I'd actually get a job in video games. I sort of thought I'd probably try and do some web development kind of stuff. But went for a couple of jobs, and one of them was at this company, Red Tribe in Melbourne, where I live. And it was, I was like a sort of minimum wage, like I've got no idea what I'm doing kind of, but like the guy who ran the company was like, yep, we need people who don't know what they're doing. So that was good. And
that was programming in that company?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, gameplay programming. So that's where I kind of got my foot in the door, and that's also where I met Barney. So maybe I'll let Barney take the story from there as well.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. We'll go right ahead.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I won't go into too much detail, but I started out just messing around and making my own stuff using HyperCard, I think, on a Mac was the first thing I made games with, but I was more coming at it from the animation point of view, and making things to kind of trigger my animations and make the animations interactive. And yeah, I'd done a bit of animation work in film and TV in Sydney.
Oh, really?
That was where I'd sort of gone up there to study, and then wound up getting a job. But all my family's in Melbourne, so I'd thought, I really want to do animation work in Melbourne instead. And even though growing up I had designed heaps of little games and made lots of little hobby games, I'd still just never had a concept in my head that game designer or game development was a thing that you could do as a job for some reason. It just never really occurred to me. So I was just focused 100% on animation. In my head, I was working my way up to going and working at Pixar or something like that. But in Sydney, I got a taste of sort of like bigger development, and I talked to people who worked on Happy Feet and stuff like that, and I kind of got a picture that actually maybe that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and those people weren't very happy and weren't getting to be very creative. Anyway, so I moved back to Melbourne, and although Sydney had a lot of film and TV animation jobs, all the animation jobs in Melbourne were in video games, and so I thought, cool, I like video games, maybe I'll animate for them. And so I went for a job at Red Tribe as well. And similar to Dave, I had no industry experience, but we were really lucky to get a job at this company. And kind of the reason we got the job was probably because it was quite a ramshackle kind of situation there, where very few experienced people, just inexperienced people teaching other inexperienced people, and it was a bit of a kind of madhouse. But that was actually a really good opportunity for us, because then we both got to kind of step up and really take on a lot more responsibility than we would have otherwise.
There's a lot of trial by fire in that company of like, you're the lead on this project now. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing.
But it's definitely the best way to learn, and I think we would have learned so much more slowly if we hadn't have been thrown in the deep end like that. And
absolutely.
I think it sort of started out that basically there was very poor communication between the art and animation team and the programming team, and we'd sit in on a kind of meeting where someone would say, this is how the mechanic's going to work, and then the artists would just sort of go off and make some art for their interpretation of that. Programmers would go off and make some stuff for their interpretation.
Exact idea or anything of what they had to actually create, or they just did their own thing.
I mean, there was sort of some scheduling, but
right.
The problem was that there would be significant kind of details in the interpretation of the minute details of how those mechanics worked, that
right.
If you're making assets on this assumption and they're making code on that assumption, then the things just don't plug in together properly. And
there was sort of, I guess as an example, there was like the game we were doing was a third-person platformer kind of thing, and in the design document there was like a sentence about, you should be able to pick up and throw things, and so the programmers had gone through and gone, okay, I guess we need a system to be able to pick up and throw objects, and the artist would be like, okay, we're going to need some objects that you can throw, and so I'd get the task, okay, we want to be able to pick up and throw objects, and I'd ask the designer, okay, what do we actually need to do? And then designers would be like, I don't really know, just maybe make something so you can pick up and throw objects. Yeah. So I'd go, right. I'd be like, yep, okay, that's my job, I'll do it. And I'd get that task done. It's like, yep, the code is in the system, so you can do that. But then no one told anyone to like actually hook that up into levels or to how that's meant to fit in with the gameplay. So there's a lot of features like that just kind of we spent time on, but
kind of
it was kind of pointless.
Right. And what kind of experience was like your superiors, like the designers and stuff like that?
There really wasn't much early on. There really wasn't much design lead.
I think that was the weakness, that there was people who kind of had a big picture, like design overview of the game, of the kind of way the story would play out, but there was no one on staff who was an experienced right. at designing and implementing the actual mechanics.
So there was juniors, sort of designery people a bit that came and went, but they never had any ownership of like, okay, make this game work. It was always, okay, you're a designer, make a spreadsheet that says like the names of the different enemies and how much health they have or something, but not like you're responsible for making this work.
It was purely design documents and nothing like tying into the actual features. Right.
And design documents were very much written by a writer who was interested in writing and not really as interested in video games or mechanics.
No way, really.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so funny.
But so it really, we have to make that stuff happen ourselves. So as a programmer or an artist at a working in a team, you really have to take ownership of what you're doing. And if I'm making a system to throw objects, I've got to be like, okay, artists and designers, I need you to like, this is how I think it should fit in with the game, and like I've got to go harass people and get art made for this system and all that stuff.
So you became like the lead designer practically, and like
that. We learned from that project.
I think me and Dave wound up sort of becoming the surrogate sort of mechanics sort of leads, because we would communicate with each other. Dave would say, in order to pick something up, these are things that would happen, and I'd say, in order to make that work, this is how we have to align the character to the object in order to make it stick to the node that it's going to attach to, and we'd workshop that and best ways to do that. Whereas previously, a designer would make a thing on some assumptions, an artist would make an animation, and then they'd both be like, well, I did my job, it's your fault if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think we were both kind of so young and insecure. We were like, shit, we'd better talk and figure out how to make this work, because I don't want to make something that looks crap. I want to, I want this to work, kind of thing. So we were just like, yeah, we would force ourselves to do the communicating that other people weren't doing.
Right.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like you guys were like pressured into trying to figure out how to get this together so you can practically keep your jobs and make like, look good, like you're creating something. Oh, that is so funny. And so
it's frustrating when you're working on stuff a lot and then you just see it like not really going anywhere, and then you start to get into this pattern where you sort of realize, I was kind of assuming someone else would be like making this all good at some point, but no one's doing it, so better kind of we don't want to be wasting all this work we're putting into it. We want to make it good. Yeah.
I mean, I was definitely a little bit driven by like someone would tell me make some animations for this combat system, and I'd sort of try to get information about how the combat system worked in terms of player movement and buttons sort of interrupting animations into other animations and stuff. And people were like, I'm not sure. And so I'd talk to the programmer, and the programmer would be like, I don't know. And so I'd just make some things, and then I'd see them plugged into the game and they look crap. And I felt like, well, this looks like I'm a crap animator. This looks like I've done a really bad job. And so I'd be like, right, I go over to the program and be like, look, I thought we were going to be, interrupting the animations into each other from this point. But if you press the button before that point, then we'd either ignore it or we'd queue it up to trigger at that point. And that's what I made the animations for. And then, we'd start workshopping, and it just kind of wound up that me and Dave ended up being the two people who kind of wanted to work like that and kind of work together like that. So we ended up getting more and more responsibility, and sort of unofficially became like the mechanics implementation guys, which was fun, but pretty stressful as well, because there was so much messy stuff going on that we weren't in control of.
Right. And so when it came from like that, and you guys knew you were the ones bringing it along, like, did you guys ever finish a project at that studio, or is this when you like figured, okay, well, we kind of got to do our own, type of projects and move on?
We finished two pretty terrible projects, actually very terrible projects that we kind of just got through, that were, they were the sort of inexperienced team given this, movie kind of tie-in title that the boss of the company had kind of wrangled us getting this contract by sort of saying how we'd be able to get it done in like no time, and it would only cost this much. So basically undercutting everyone.
That's always the story, right?
But also, but then that gave us the chance, because we were like, hey, we did this terrible project. Now can we like make a little team and like work on a game ourselves? So Barney led this team, and we started working on this really sweet game.
Oh, really?
Which we did.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we had our own original little thing going that I think at the time, definitely like looking back, it was way overscoped for what we could have done with the team. But the core mechanic was really cool. It was a kind of like a third person combat kind of game, a bit like I guess like a mashup between something like the like 3D Mario games and also something like Devil May Cry, that was kind of a bit accessible but had kind of crazy over the top action, and we had a few pretty interesting mechanics. But we were kind of partway through developing that when the kind of
GFC
financial thing. Crisis kind of happened in America.
I was waiting for that. No, just kidding.
And all these Australian companies were kind of operating on, they were like, oh, we're just cheap labor for America, so we get these crappy little movie games and we do them cheap and we do them quickly, and at least we get to be in the industry. And I think all the companies thought, if we do this enough, we'll save up just enough money that then we can make our own original game. But they were just kind of never far enough ahead of the 8-ball to be able to stop and go, all right, we can afford to pay you all for the next 2 years to make this other game. So we were kind of on this treadmill. So while...
Right. Go ahead.
So while me and Dave were doing this, the company was making, we would just had like us and a couple of other guys, but the company was focusing on a bunch of other, like money maker kind of projects, like contract things, including like a Wii cheerleading game and a bunch of other stuff like that. And then things went bad in America, and we lost all those contracts, and we couldn't get more. And so, yeah, things kind of fizzled out. We lost some people, and we tried to hold on to just the core team and keep working on our game and travel around trying to like shop for a publisher. But yeah, it wound up just being like, no one was going to pay the money we needed for this just like weird experimental game. So the company went out of business.
Yeah, that's crazy because I see a lot of that with game companies around here. Because I'm actually interested in game design, and I'm actually taking college courses for it right now. So I'm trying to inch my way into it. So I've been looking at jobs and everything, and just kind of seeing my way through what's out there. And yeah, I see a lot of companies that are the kind of the third party, like, oh, make these assets for this mother company, and then they'll kind of like claim everything for the project, but they have like this small little title at the bottom of, so you have a lot of these smaller companies, like kind of the one you were talking about,
And
so.
it's definitely good to work for those as well, like when you're starting out and getting experience and stuff, because there's always smart people to learn from,
right,
on those sort of projects. And I mean, usually the turnaround for like staff at any video game company is usually like a few years. So you kind of get this, so no one really expects people to be sticking around for ages. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Partly because companies burn people out, which isn't very good. But yeah, when you're starting out, like you learn a lot from those little projects.
Right. And so when you guys moved from that studio, so is this when you gained together and started making your own games, or how did that come about?
No, we still didn't think for a second that was a possibility. This was still like before Braid and those things had really come out and kind of, made everyone go, oh, hey, like people are making careers just as a one-person team, So we both just went and looked for other jobs, and at the time the jobs that were happening were mobile studios. All those big companies were dying, going out of business. But there was a few mobile companies that were doing really well in locally, and so Dave wound up working for one of them, which was Firemint, and I wound up working for another one, which was iMonkey. And we worked for them for a bit, and they were both individually quite cool little studios run by kind of smart, talented people. And then both those studios wound up bought by EA to sort of make like a master, like Melbourne EA mobile studio. And
really?
Bought, and then we got moved back into the same building together under the banner of like this EA mobile stuff.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay. So how long did you guys stay there?
So it's probably, I think it was like there maybe 4 years all up, including when it was Firemint. So it's probably 2 years after it became EA, before we left. Yeah. It was a bit weird because it was almost a little indie studio when I joined Firemint. Like they'd made Flight Control, which was this kind of really tiny game, very, very different in the scope that we were kind of used to. We were used to these, it's meant to be kind of AAA. It was trying to be, 3D console games, and then going to this like really tiny game that was sort of made in a couple of weeks, that was doing heaps better than anything we'd ever worked on before. And so those sort of games, and also a bunch of racing games and things on iPhone. And then so they had like a bunch of original projects they were working on that were kind of interesting and quite cool and like novel, and playing with the touchscreen, which was quite novel at the time. And then we sort of got bought out by EA, and initially it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be all right. They're sort of just saying we want you to keep doing what you're doing,
Right.
but then sort of slowly it was starting to become more kind of merging in with this other company, moving offices, stopping doing most of the original IP stuff we were doing and just doing more sequels and things like that, and more. And then
Right.
freemium came around, and I was not a big fan of
microtransaction
freemium.
things.
Ah, yeah, of course.
That was,
So
I
that's
think
that's stuff that put a dampener on it a bit, I think, for me.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
for
Are you
us
guys
that,
really are you guys really against that type of freemium type stuff and,
I
just
mean,
free to play games in
conceptually,
general
I
or
think I think conceptually the business model could be used to do things that are good for gamers and good for developers. I don't think it is used for that very often, but it's,
Yeah.
it's not like inherently evil, but it's just it has sort of, wound up in some actually pretty bad best practices, sort of becoming
Yeah.
but the main thing for us was that like what we specialized in was like making like cool feeling combat mechanics and things like that, and none of that was being used. It was all about funneling players to the store and these kind of retention and marketing type things, which like they're not our skill set and not something that we cared about to learn to become our skill set. We were like,
Right.
we want to make cool explosions and make it feel really satisfying when you slice a guy's head off and stuff like that. We don't really want to learn this
Right.
side of things.
You want to make video games. You don't want to sit there and try to promote like Pepsi within a menu or something like
Yeah,
that. It's
exactly.
like
Yeah,
I remember seeing a lot of that in like I remember the big one was Burnout. Like they had actual like billboards in the game
Yeah,
and
yeah.
about like and it's like no, that's real. That's not supposed to be there. Like I feel like gets in the way of like actual game development and what games are supposed to be. And of course that goes along with big corporations. So it's funny that you say that you actually bumped into that when actually getting into the game industry, because man, I feel like we're just now getting back on our feet from, or I say us, like ours, but because I mean, like, gamers and the game development companies are finally realizing that the games matter, and that's what people are also realizing, the public's realizing.
I mean,
Yeah, I think
there's
all
definitely
the cheap tricks that were kind of super effective at first kind of wear off pretty quickly, I think. Like people
Right.
realize, oh, they're just doing this exact same model that this successful game did. And that kind of, so people stop spending money on that because it's not as, not interesting or new anymore. But that's the thing like that persists is if it's a really solid, fun game, then people are going to
Yeah.
want to keep playing it.
Yeah,
like
of course.
in the same way that people kind of just dropped everything to try and make MMOs after World of Warcraft made so much money, and
Right.
they kind of realized over time, it's not just like a simple repeatable formula. And it was actually then after some time, only the people who were really willing to kind of, do a good job of it,
Yeah.
and only the people who were really dedicated, and still those people weren't making the World of Warcraft money. So, only the people who were willing to kind of operate in that environment, who actually loved it, were going to stick it out and be there. And I think the same thing happened with mobile and microtransactions. Everyone was like, the costs of making these games are really low, the profits are really high, drop everything, only make that. And then they, slowly realize, it's only the stuff that is really well suited to this, and that is, actually done by people who are really smart about this stuff, that's making that kind of money. We can't just like jump in and cash in. And so, yeah, people kind of slowly, at least lots of people slowly gravitated back, and lots of people, became really smart about mobile stuff and kept on doing that.
Yeah, and
so
I think
it is
so,
good to see
like,
things equalizing a little bit.
yeah. Yeah, finally. And I feel like at a time there, I was really scared for like the PS3, Xbox 360 generation where they were coming out with these big games, but you couldn't even like you couldn't even let a friend borrow the game anymore. You had these like codes that you had to put
Yeah.
in, and it was like tied to your account. It was just like, what's happening? Like
Yeah.
the original, like being able to like give your friend a game or rent a game, like that all goes away. And I feel like, it hurts yourself or the company in the long run, because it's like, well, now not enough people are getting this experience. And finally
Yeah.
they settled down and they got rid of that, and
There
now we're
was
just going to get a lot of add-on content
there was
to,
definitely a
kind
time
of
where
sort that out.
I can't remember which Dead Space game it was, but I think it was maybe the third one where like I bought it and put it in, and like the whole like game kind of title screen had like, like advertising scrolls and links to like other, things that you could join up there. I was like, holy
Yeah, it's a horror
crap.
game. It's a horror game. It frightened me, right? It worked very
Oh
effectively.
man.
Yeah.
Which is so funny because I think that also keys into a lot of movies too that try to like shove things in your face. And I remember like listening to Tarantino talk about like how he just wanted to have like Denny's as the diner where like all this like stuff in Pulp Fiction happens and stuff,
Yeah.
and just do that. And then you like eventually saw that, well, they started doing things like that in movies, and it was like such a weird parallel world. And it just amazes me that also the game industry like went through that whole entire thing. And
Yeah,
but
I
I feel
think a
like
lot of the
you
things
know
that we're discovering in games and thinking they're unique problems are pretty, are pretty kind of commonly happening, yeah, across movies and lots of other industries as well. But if we're all game specialized, it's just we're like, oh, holy crap, this is a new thing.
Yeah, right. And and what's so cool is you also have the the independent games that have, I think, really drawn us away from that. I think that maybe, the big companies out there finally realize like, well, it really doesn't matter about being this big, enormous thing. These independent games are coming out, and some small, some big, but they make quite an impact. And I think that's also probably the best timing for you guys to come out with your game. And I think Crawl is like the perfect game on the PlayStation Network. It's just, I mean, it just shows that you can have a game like that. And because I think years before it would never have been able to survive, but because of so many games recently coming out and just showing that, well, these games matter, and it's the gameplay that matters and the experience. And
Yeah, I mean, even,
I think
even when we started working on it, we didn't really think that it was a kind of the sort of game that you could really, sell properly as a big indie game, like being local multiplayer only and all that stuff. It wasn't,
right.
There just wasn't, so this is going back like 4 years, I guess. There was just, there wasn't really much, I guess Towerfall came out maybe half a year after we'd been working on it. And that was local multiplayer only. And that was Booyah exclusive, I think, at first or something. So it was kind of a weird one.
Yeah.
But really
that was encouraging, at least, to see something local multiplayer on PC, to be like, okay,
right.
Well, at least we're not like, at least we're not completely alone in this.
Initially it was like, oh, I guess I don't know if we'd get this on Steam. Like that Steam, this was like when Greenlight maybe was just coming in at first,
right?
And it was really hard to get the game on Steam. So we're like, oh, we might end up just selling it on our own website. Yeah, but it's still kind of cool, a fun idea. Let's just make it anyway. So and seeing like now like that's so many local multiplayer games coming out. It's like it's pretty crazy how much it's changed in such a small time. And the digital distribution side of things and making it really easy for indies on consoles and stuff is pretty awesome, because it I really like indie games. I really like, especially I've got less time to play games, I guess. I play so many more indie games than I play big AAA ones. And
and I do too, which is and I think that's funny because I feel like the bigger games like ask so much from you, so you feel like, okay, so I'm gonna play Destiny 2 and I'm just gonna pour all these hours and hours into the game. And I just think like independent games just have this kind of like there's something special about it that shows like I'm this small little game that you might absolutely love or hate, depending on what it is. But
it's a sort of, if it's a few hours you're investing and you feel like, I might not like it, but I'll try this weird new game, and like being like, that's kind of weird.
Right, and it's not $60.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that's like, there was a few evenings of mucking around on the computer. It wasn't 60 hours and like, oh, this game's a huge grind. I feel like I have to get through it, and you keep playing kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely that energy level requirement is a big deal for me. I'm like, it's really nice to feel like, oh yeah, there's just this cute little game. I just want to try that out, and if I don't like it, I won't play it much more. But if I do, then like, if I get into it, that's cool.
Right. And you know what's so funny is with Materia, I saw that game on your guys' list on your website, and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. All right, I tried a few out, and I downloaded that, and oh my God, I played the whole entire thing, and I'm sitting on my couch, and my girlfriend's at the desk, and I'm sitting there playing this game with all these just all these sound effects and just that, oh man, the voice alone is it really is. That is not a game like when you're talking about like playing a game at silence, like no, you cannot. It's the best thing. Just like moving like your head left and right and like going through and making that that almost like balloon like sound, like oh man, it's just. And I played through the whole thing, and it was just great. I didn't expect to like actually go through each level, but it just like pulled me in, and I didn't expect to like put that time in, but it I feel like when you don't notice like you're actually putting in your time into a game, that's when like, well, obviously this game is good, I mean, I think when you start to notice that, you're like, I'm not having so much fun.
Yeah, awesome.
I think a lot of it for me is like, I think people talk about like the sort of difference between indie and AAA, but I sort of feel like it's maybe more, or what's exciting to me and what's exciting to, I think, some people, lots of people, is more the difference between just these really, really long form games and something more like arcade games where you expect to, in an arcade game, you'd put your money in and you'd expect to know how to play the game and be operating it at full, in the full way within
right.
30 seconds or a couple of minutes at least to get your dollar's worth out of playing that game. It's not something that you're sort of investing an 8-hour tutorial to get started and then, and I think there's definitely like a lot of amazing games in that like long form kind of game coming out. And they're generally games that I just really struggle to fit into my lifestyle. I think like Dark Souls is one of the only kind of, I guess, things like that I like try really hard to force in there.
Right.
And I still just really struggle, because I don't have that time. And it's so long between play sessions that I feel like I've, lost a lot of the not even just the muscle memory, but just the actual memory of where places are and what I'm trying to do.
Right.
Whereas, picking up something like Downwell is, from the second I'm playing it, I'm having a great time. If it's 5 minutes, if it's an hour, if it's 4 hours. So yeah, I think that kind of the smaller games are bringing back that kind of arcade thing, and I think it's something that maybe like Nintendo was kind of, I think, one of the companies that like held on to that a bit. And so, the idea of picking up a Mario Kart game or one of the more recent kind of Mario games, it still has a bit more of that kind of feel that you can just sort of grab it and play for a bit. But yeah, definitely that's something that became really rare for a while, that you just couldn't get because everyone was trying to, one up each other on how big and epic their games could be, and we got some awesome games out of that. But it's really good to see that variety and getting those little experiences as well.
And do you think that's because also like trying to push like an in-depth story that pulls you in, or do you think it's just like goes into like game mechanics and how it like just sucks you in right away?
No, that's definitely a part of it. I think when we were working at Red Tribe, there was a perception that like, and I think lots of games were suffering from this, that each individual game had to do everything. It had to have cutscenes and this amount of story, and it had to have this amount of combat, and it had to have this amount of extra like upgrading things. And there was just a time where kind of everything
and puzzles and platforming and
right.
Yeah.
all these like you can't just do the combat. You've got to do all the other bits as well. Yeah.
And there were just, because there are a few, there were the leading games were doing that, and there weren't examples of other successful games that weren't, and so people were just looking at God of War and being like, and even people who weren't inspired by story and didn't have an idea for story just felt, but it's just one of the tick boxes that you have to have. And so we're laboring a lot on things that weren't their passion or weren't their strength, or weren't where they actually had the spare production values. Whereas I think now people are getting more accepting of this game is just only focusing on this one element,
right,
and it's doing a good job of it, and that's cool. I think the Walking Dead games were a cool moment for that, because they were very like broadly accepted, and they were just and I mean there's a lot wrong with those games, but they were saying like, we're just focusing on this kind of story thing, and that's okay. So yeah, I think that's been getting a lot better. Yeah.
Right, and I think that's also like Telltale's so clever with doing the episode thing, which I thought for the longest time was so awkward and just like, this is a video game, not a TV show, and I just I didn't understand it for the longest time, but it actually, I think, shows for people that have the money and want to make money, that they can kind of like squeeze it out a little more, but it's kind of like camouflage too, where it's not like burdening to where we have to have this giant game. We could have this one episode that pulls you in, and if you want to keep going, you can buy the next game. And I think that was also showing that they could have these smaller ideas, or more of an adventure game set in this. Of course, it's a tie-in to one of the best successful like TV shows, but then again, it's also staying true to what their roots come from, which is practically they started out with making the Tales of Monkey Island and all of that, and that's kind of like, wow, it's amazing how close they stayed to that actual adventure feel throughout the games they've made, and obviously they've done very, very well with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty kind of stoked to see them do so well, because it just means, I mean, even though like a lot of the stuff that they're doing now isn't exactly what I'm into.
Sure, right.
I know that it means that there's people who are doing the stuff that is what I'm into, who are going to be able to get the funding for it, who are going to like say, yeah, I want to make a story-driven game that's about like Lovecraftian horror, or this like crazy murder mystery, and and people will be like, yeah, well, these other games are making great money, so yeah, we can afford to give that a try.
Sure.
I think short stories length kind of games work really well. Like I play a lot of indie point and click adventure kind of things, because it's kind of where I started out making games, and I still quite enjoy playing them.
Right. And
that length, like a sort of 4-hour long story game, is I think the perfect amount of time. When it gets longer than that, it ends up, you feel like it's a kind of drawn out TV series kind of thing where, you're just getting through the box set, and they've got all these episodes where nothing's happening and that kind of thing. Whereas when it's a really short, tight story, that keeps it really engaging from start to finish. And then, sweet, that was an awesome, interesting story. And then you can go on and find another one if you're sort of keen for more. So I think that's that's the evolution I quite like with the story-led games. Just like the brevity and feeling like you can just sell a game for $10. It doesn't have to be massive, and be on all the consoles. It can just be like something you put on Steam, and it's like a few hours long, and it's just this interesting little tale that someone's written with some cool art and
right, like Naughty Dog's coming out with the kind of standalone download content for their side story for Uncharted, and so many people are like pissed off that it's like, oh, well, why isn't it like this full game where it's $60 and it's like, it's download content? Why is it $40? It's like, well, no, it's this thing that we're trying to keep, we're tying it into the bigger game that was pretty successful. And we want to have our own kind of story here, and you really don't have to pay that much. And people are like, no, I want another Uncharted. It's like, oh man, it's like, it sucks that these huge companies still have to like fight that. You know what I mean? They still have to
I
fight
guess
to
I guess the people who are time poor are the people with the money. Because
exactly.
when you're working really hard, you're working full time and
Yeah.
stuff, you've probably got the money to spend, but you don't have the time to play the really long games.
Oh, I know.
So it's a
Yeah.
bit of a catch-22.
Yeah, I think it's I think it does come with age because I've realized that the older I've gotten, I've and I don't know if it is because like independent games are usually shorter and kind of straight to the point to kind of like catch people right away, or but I mean I
Mm,
still enjoy. I loved Uncharted 4. I think it was a great game. Last of Us is one of my favorites, but it's the type
Yeah.
of thing that independent games are just shorter and sweeter, and they just have this little like story that they want to tell you. And I'm saying like it's like this little tiny game that's cute, and it's not. It's this game that these hardworking developers made to tell you the story, and I think that really comes across when
yeah,
you know
they tend to be very focused, I guess. Like they know what the things they're interested in achieving with a game are much smaller than with a AAA game, and so
I
they can
mean,
really dig down and nail the thing they're interested in.
yeah.
that kind of winds up being uh, just a coincidental advantage of just having a small budget, that you just have to choose what are the core things that I care about, that we can do a good job here, that are actually valuable, and not waste everybody's time with like a whole lot of other stuff that doesn't serve that. And yeah, I think AAA is slowly kind of falling out of this perception that every game has to do all these millions of different things, but that still, yeah, that there still is a lot of tacking on of multiplayer modes to games that don't, justify it, and
Right.
things like that. So I think that, yeah, being forced to be lean kind of forces you to be a good designer, or it breaks you and you don't manage to be a good designer and you have to throw the project away because you couldn't make it work, on just that lean budget. But it definitely is, yeah, a good test. And so the stuff that goes through that test and passes, is often good.
Right, and I doubt you guys are thinking, "Oh man, are we gonna actually make money from this? Like when we're creating this, like this game, is it gonna be like, are people gonna pick it up and love it and throw money at it? Or I mean, I doubt that's like your main thought, and I mean, is
Yeah,
it?
It's
no,
definitely not why we decided to do games, because
Right,
I think people who go into games to make money are, I don't know, bit weird and deluded, because
right,
there's a lot easier ways to
right,
make money.
because
But
games are still
but
technically
it's
an
definitely
art, I
like you
guess.
sort of want to be, yeah, you want to be a successful business, I guess, because that means you can keep doing it. That's the kind of the priority. And you also, when you feel like, we've got this game people are really interested in, you don't want to feel like, we kind of blew it, we didn't
Right.
do the marketing, and no one, and we should have got heaps of people playing it, and we didn't. And so it's definitely something you think about a lot, and you try and consider. But it's, yeah, I guess it's not so much considering, okay, how can we make the most money? It's more like, how can we make the best game? And they kind of go hand in hand a lot of the time with the sort of game we're making, with the sort of game we're making where we're selling it for, you buy the game and you own it, kind of thing. We're not kind of trying to get them to subscribe or to be playing it every day so that they can keep spending money in game or something like that.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so how do you guys feel about like how crawl has come across? Are you sitting at the computer looking at reviews every single day, or what's your feelings about it?
I mean, I think it's been a kind of softer process for us because of the early access. So, we were
Right.
able to put out an early thing and start getting opinions and reviews and feedback, and kind of, but without it just being like, I mean, I think the fear of just doing, a full release without that, especially for this type of game, of
Hmm.
just going like, right, no one's played it apart from our buddies who are play testers, and we just sunk 5 years of like our kind of time and money into it, and then let's put it out there and just pray no one discovers something that's a big surprise to us that was bad about the game.
Right.
Whereas we know everything that people are going to complain about and that people like. We've seen it on the forums. We've been through it, and we've already sort of slowly been through the test of, do people like it? Do we feel okay about how people feel about it? Can we satisfy everyone? Who can we satisfy? Who can't we satisfy? And so the kind of big launch after that is not so stressful. I'm not pulling my hair out waiting to see what people think, because we've been seeing what people think for quite a while now, but it has been really good to see it going onto consoles and getting this kind of broader awareness, I guess. But yeah, so I think the process has been smoother because of that. And it was also something where, with just a single release game, the whole time you're just trying to learn how big of a gamble to make. You're trying to guess, how much money can I spend on this? Can I afford to spend on this?
Right.
Because if I spend twice as much as it makes back, I can't afford to make another game. I've just got to, I've got to go crawling back to the industry and beg for a job that I don't enjoy. So it's not just like, I just need to get rich. It's really, there's a lot hanging on it. And whereas with the way that we approach the early access of sort of, and also the design of this game being quite modular, being something that you can sort of plug things into and grow it without there having been a huge gaping hole of something that was missing before you put it in.
Right.
It sort of meant that we could put out a quite small product that was a complete product, and based on how much people liked it and how much people were buying it, we could kind of keep on judging, is it worth spending more money? How much more time and money is it worth spending on it? And basically know the whole time, we're not going to go broke if we spend a few more months on it. We're not going to go broke if we spend a few more months on it. Whereas people just doing that one-time sale after years of development, that's much more of a risk. And so, I can imagine they'll be just sitting there like watching those analytics and watching those sales and just being like, come on, this is still a loss. I've still lost, 2 years.
Well,
I've
like
still
that
lost 1
when we
year.
first launched.
Oh no, I'm still making a bad salary for all that time.
Right.
It was because we had that when we first went on to early access. Really, it was like we sort of had a bit of press and it was all super exciting, but we had no idea, is this gonna be people hadn't really played it yet, so we had no idea of when people actually played it, rather than just seeing videos of it, whether they'd actually go, oh, I thought it would be something much better or something, because you just don't know. And so there's that but that was like, at least that was after, I guess, a year and a half we'd spent working mostly on Crawl. So but when it's a bigger project, especially if it's a bigger team, because it was just the two of us and we're working at home, so we'd kind of just been working on from our savings, which is we were easily able to do. So we had very little risk, really. The biggest risk was like, we made a terrible game, we should go and get real jobs again. Like that was the worst that could happen. So we were pretty lucky, really. But still, that pressure, that first launch was pretty stressful.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
It's also, it's not just because I think so. Definitely, there's that initial fear of, are we going to make enough, money to justify having made this at all, and not have just been, we didn't just throw our savings away to make this. But then there's also, as soon as you get past the threshold, you start looking at the next threshold, and you start looking at other people's games and how many they're selling, and thinking, well, we're not selling as many of them. What have we done wrong? What are our, what are our mistakes? And so it's very hard to, it's very hard to know. And it's also, whenever you do marketing, the feedback on marketing is so indirect that it's impossible to know what impact any specific thing you did has. And so you're like, I spent 4 weeks working on this trailer, or I spent 6 weeks working on this trailer. Was that time well spent? Like, I have no idea. I have no idea if that, if that like significantly changed the opinions of people compared to just spending one afternoon capturing some gameplay and just putting some music behind it. So there's always because you don't know what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, it is very easy to always imagine I'm doing something wrong, so yeah,
which
it's
is
a
funny you
big
say
relief.
that is because how I found the game was literally through, and I think it was Greg Rice from Double Fine liked a tweet from you guys that
Yeah.
posted about someone complaining about how this game couldn't possibly make it because of the crash, the 2000 whatever crash of the independent game industry. And
Pixel
I'm
yeah.
like, oh, so what's this game that this guy's talking about? And I looked it up. I'm like, this looks really interesting. Okay, so and I played your guys' games, your website, and I'm like, well, okay, well then, and so it just kind of shows that, like what you're talking about, like you really don't know what's going to
Exactly.
work. Some
No,
stupid
that was Barney's
tweet.
brilliant tactics. He like planned that.
Oh god, you find that all,
But
huh?
that's exactly right. Like, so the trailer that I, spend all these weeks on, that still got less retweets and everything than that screenshot of a guy saying, "I hate this game."
Oh god.
And that's how it is with marketing across the board. Like the few times we've had like really amazing marketing success, they've just been off random little things we did on a whim, that we never really expected. And then the times we've gone like, oh yeah, I think we can drum up some interest here. It's never been something that you can just manufacture. It's always been random things like anecdotes and things like that. So yeah, it's pretty nerve-wracking, but it's also a really fun side that we just completely didn't get when we were working in AAA. When you're working for
Right.
EA and there's like this marketing department and sales department and all of these kind of steps and PR and stuff between you and the people who play the games.
Right,
It's
because
actually
now
really,
you're all of that.
yeah, exactly. And that's really fun. And so it means that I can just do a tweet and some guy, responds to me and just we have a chat personally, and then, they're off playing the game and they're giving feedback, and that's changing what we do with the game and all that stuff. That was really a big surprise thing that I've actually realized that I really love that, and that would be a really bad thing to miss out on in going back to AAA,
Right.
to miss out on that just direct interaction with people and that kind of excitement of of just like I guess everything you want to make it, and then you want to show it to people and talk about it, and you kind of you get a lot more of that when you're just a small team making a game and you're talking directly with people who make it, people who play it, sorry, and and just everyone on the internet.
Sure, and it'd be of course a great thing that Crawl makes all this type of money and you guys go on to, extend your company and become big, and I think it's just kind of like, well, that's how the story goes, to where you're just kind of gonna forget your roots because you're now on to bigger, better things. And that's what's so hard about these giant companies. Or it's like, remember when you were 15 and how you felt about this game, and this is what you wanted. It's like, do that thing again. And it's hard
Yeah.
because you're implementing the marketing and you're implementing what's going to be the response, and how are people, how much do people want to pay for this. And I think that's what's so great about independent games, is because you're kind of forgetting that idea of, okay, well, we have the marketing and this and that and that. And of course you got to do some of that, but it's kind of the low risk, the low risk you got to put out there to make, this game, this independent game. And so,
Yeah, I think having operating on a really small budget, and so keeping that risk and that gamble really low, that's what enables you to do experimental and weird things, because you're not, like a big company that's just got, hundreds of employees all, soaking up however many, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars each a year just to have their salaries, making a thing that takes 2 years. They just can't afford to take that risk on something weird like other people controlling the monsters, or whatever it is. They that they don't have that freedom to just give it a try and kind of see and
Sure.
iterate if it goes well, because just to give it a try and just get it on shelves or get people to see it would already be gambling just so many millions, that if they're gambling those millions, it has to be something that is huge and can potentially make this huge amount back. So yeah,
even with a much smaller company like 10 people or something, if you're sort of running the studio of 10 people and they're all depending on their salary day to day, and they might have families and stuff like that, and yeah, it's not even this kind of, it's not even about like how much money you're making necessarily. It's sort of just about like, I'm kind of responsible for all these people's like living. So
Right.
So that's like a big burden to put on like the risks you're going to take creatively. Yeah, it's a really tough situation. I think Double Fine does a really good in between kind of thing, where they're really quite big, but they do lots and lots of like really small projects. So they have quite small teams and they distribute it like really nicely, and they're really good with community as well.
I was just gonna make that point because Double Fine just did the Amnesia Fortnite, and it kind of shows where it started so small, and now it's kind of like, oh well, we kind of have to have these things to have these new and crazy ideas, because people actually respond really good to it. I mean, who thought Costume Quest would do anything?
They talk directly to their community, and like like I follow a bunch of the people that work there on Twitter, and they're constantly talking about the stuff, and so it's a lot more like a bunch of indies kind of working together almost. It's really cool. Yeah.
Right. And what's funny is they do a lot of like smaller events and stuff, and I kind of like fall away from seeing Double Fine as like kind of like this big company, but a lot of people in the industry talk about them. They're doing a lot of things that a lot of game developers aren't doing. It's kind of a lot of out of the box, and
I think they enjoy like working more as small teams as well. And so they, instead of being like, oh, we've got 60 people, we make 60-person games, we just make a cluster of these small games. And I think that's definitely something that, having worked in AAA, I don't have any dreams of making games that are so big that they have 60 or 100 people working on them, like, because I've seen that, and I've seen that there is absolutely no part of that that's fun to me. Even though the end products are impressive, the primary work on those games is management, is people management,
Sure.
and
Right.
that's not fun to me. I like drawing monsters and animating them, and when you're doing something so big, even each individual person who's drawing monsters and animating them is doing such a tiny portion of the overall thing that they're not shaping things, they're not really creating things, and the main task is actually managing them, so that all the hundreds of, or all the many people who are doing that, all their work fits in together and fits in with the with the programmers and with the schedule and all that stuff. And so I think definitely, even if we just made a ridiculous amount of money, I think after having seen so much of the kind of bigger studio AAA style development, I don't think we'd be at all tempted to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think that I think that that's I think maybe like doing, just having a bunch of small teams making multiple small projects at once, like Double Fine, is one of the areas that it is a bit appealing to grow into.
Sure. Yeah, and and I think that's also something just to always reflect on, that you can be big or be doing well and still have that independent feeling of it, as long as you're able to take technology in hand and use the community with it, because I think community is such a huge part of it. I mean, you can be one faced in the way of having ads out there and being, look at this, but if you let them actually work with you and kind of respond to what you're putting out there, it just really shows what you can do.
I think Double Fine are doing a really cool thing that is kind of kind of a new thing, and something that I feel like people are going to do more and more. And I kind of wish that, we could find ways to make more of this, which is that they're selling the process as well. They're not just selling like the end product of games. They're selling the experience of them as a bunch of bumbling people attempting to make games, and you get to watch that in Amnesia Fortnite and stuff like that. And that's I love that side, and I enjoy that side more than I enjoy the games. In fact,
I have to agree.
So and that's something that you get for free. Like if you're developing games, that's there. All your struggles and all your mistakes and the arguments and meetings and, prototypes and all that stuff. Like you're already making that. So why not find a way to share that with the community so they can be more involved with that side of things and be more involved with you as kind of people who have wants and needs and make huge mistakes and laugh and, fail at prototypes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's something that we'll probably see more of, and that I'd love to do more of myself, because it makes you more hooked in with with people as an actual person yourself, and not just as a company selling a product.
Right, exactly. And I mean, so what do you see after doing Crawl, like putting it actually out there in the community? And I mean, what's your next project with all this information you've gotten and all this information you've seen on, how people respond to your game and stuff like we're talking about now with Double Fine? I mean, what do you see next with now actually shipping out your, Crawl? So what's next?
Good question. Yeah, we don't really. We're sort of in this kind of limbo period at the moment where we're like, let's just like take a breather. We don't have to rush into the next thing necessarily, and we'll still be doing more stuff for Crawl, but I think like I've been doing lots of little game jams and stuff like that and been really enjoying that. So I think we'll probably do. I'd like to do just a few little game jammy kind of bits and pieces. Right. This year, and see like what kind of thing we develop together that we really like and we're like excited about doing together. But yeah, I know at this point we're still like we're still at the point where we haven't quite worked out. Okay, what's our next thing? What are we going to do?
Well, when it comes along, you can't rush, projects, and because then you'll stumble and
yeah.
But so you guys have your
dive into the
right. So you guys have your main jobs, and then you do this as like obviously like what you want to do as your hobby, and what you love, right?
No. This is our full-time thing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't show. It's not what I'm saying. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's great. I'm very happy to hear that you guys are doing what you love full time.
Yeah. No, we quit our job. So yeah, we quit that company. That was kind of when all the microtransaction stuff came in. We kind of had a talk and thought, like we're getting older and we're potentially going to have kids and mortgages anytime soon. So if we don't, we don't enjoy the stuff we're doing at work, it's boring, it's right. Microtransactions, it's, whatever. If we don't kind of have a go at doing something that's the kind of games we actually like now, then we're only going to have more responsibilities that'll lock us kind of tighter into needing this industry job. So we thought, we'll quit, we'll spend a year kind of making something that we think is cool, and then at the end of the year we'll kind of reassess and just decide, is this working for us? We want to keep doing it. And then we went into Crawl, and we were happy with how it was going, and now it's about, I think it's more than 4 years since we actually quit. And yeah, we're very lucky to be kind of making. I mean, I'm making more money than I was doing making boring stuff for EA, which is basically the best things could have possibly gone. Wow. Really. Right. And I mean the main thing that I feel like we've like the main success, I think, is that we've sort of bought ourselves enough time to prototype a bunch of stuff and not be in a panic to start selling the next game straight away, because I think that's the big fear, is being so tight in terms of money that as soon as you start to get an idea off the ground, you kind of force it into full production before it's actually proven, and then you wind up spending 2 years on a game that actually wasn't such a solid idea in the first place, just out of the pressure to have another selling game quickly. So yeah, I think we've been really lucky in kind of Crawl doing well enough that we can afford to take some time and just kind of, prototype things and, spend a few weeks on this, spend a few weeks on that, and just see if anything, really takes our interest instead of panicking to find the next game.
Right, and I think that's what's great about you guys still doing the game jams, because it kind of shows these little ideas that you want to put out there, and you have. And I do have to say, there's some really cool ideas you guys have up there that are these little, these smaller sized games. And what is it, the Road of Rhea, is that correct?
Riders of Rhea.
Riders of Rhea. I'm sorry, I forgot the title there, but I really thought it was a unique game, and I thought it just was. Oh man, it just had all these feelings of like this like sci-fi world, and kind of like this like mysticism of like just what are these subjects and what are they fighting for? And I just love
cool.
stuff like
I'm glad that came through, because I kind of like had these ideas I wanted to get through, but then I was like, but I'll just do something really quickly.
It felt really, it almost felt
allude to that there's something there, but there's not really anything.
Well, I think it came across very clearly, because to me it felt a lot like a Tron game, but in more of like almost a Mad Max type of post-apocalyptic, kind of game. And I was really curious about the story. Like, I mean, I bet a lot of people probably tell you that, but I don't know. I do want more. I want to know what's going on. But I think that's what's like so special about that game. It's this little short game that shows these mechanics that work so well, and I don't know. It's a big mystery to me, but I just have to say that those come across really well, and I don't stop doing the jams, because I think you're kind of seeing. Hopefully soon enough see a pattern to where people are picking up on these smaller games that aren't these giant projects. So
I think game jams are kind of an even more magnified version of the whole sort of small developer situation.
Right.
It's just kind of solidified where it's like you're operating on a small budget, and so you can't define every little detail just to get a story concept across. So you have to try and evoke as much as possible with the least amount of actual, pen to paper kind of thing. And it's just sort of coincidentally that happens to be the kind of storytelling and the kind of world building that I enjoy more anyway. And I think there's a lot of people who are like-minded about that, who like having an atmosphere and an environment kind of evoked to them with a lot of kind of room to imagine it being bigger than what's shown on the page, as opposed to just every detail being defined, and then you're limited to those details are all there is.
Well, I think that's a huge thing with Snowed In. See, I played that, and I was thinking like, look, it could be longer, but the thing is, if it was, it's like, would you have different snow globes? And then you're just trying to get into this whole other thing. And it's like, no. You know what it is this, it's this little short story that does these things very well. And that's exactly what it is. It doesn't need to be any less. It doesn't have to be any more. And I think that's, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. With that sort of thing, when we start out, we've got no idea what we're making. That one particularly was like, someone had written down just like something about a snow globe in our sort of ideas lists. And we heard, an hour after we'd heard the theme, and we're sort of like, kind of a picture of snow globe looking pretty. Like, we could do that. And then Adrian wanted to do some like story voice stuff, so he started writing kind of stuff like that.
Oh man, well that came across.
Me and John
well.
were just like thinking, we could do a kind of physicsy thing where you kind of shake it and stuff, and then that didn't really work that well. So then we ended up just making it so you can kind of walk a character around, and it evolved into just a little really tiny adventure game.
Right, and I loved that. It felt very good. It felt very like, this is such a little adventure game, and oh man, oh god, you could have 100 more of those. I'd play it. That was great. but but I'll stop boasting about the games. I mean, I bet you love hearing it, but I'm being serious. I think they're great. I hope you guys do a lot more, and I'm happy Carl's doing so well that you can do this full time. So
Yeah.
so keep
Well, I
working
mean,
on
that's
it.
definitely the game jam like part is kind of the most fun part of any game. That first part where you just, it's a bit ramshackle and you just crush some stuff together and you sort of try and get the core of what's cool and exciting, but you don't spend weeks just knocking out, assets or anything like that. So yeah, I think we'll definitely be focusing in on a bunch of things like that, and just getting to stretch our legs in different genres and different ideas. Yeah, and just see what's kind of keeps us excited.
Well, that's good. Great. I mean, just, keep the mind flowing, see what actually catches on. You might run into like a game jam and then realize that, well, this could be a lot bigger and, just catch
I mean,
on
that's
with
what
that.
Crawl
And
was.
well,
Crawl was just a game jam idea,
oh,
and
really?
I think, yeah, and I think that if we were tasked with make a thing that you think will sell and be successful, we never would have, come like been ballsy enough to sort of try and make something as weird as Crawl. We would have been, oh no, that's that doesn't have any legs, or that's not proven, or it's local multiplayer only, or
Right,
whatever.
right.
But so yeah, it's kind of because of the game jam, you kind of free yourself to be allowed to make something crap. I think that actually has a huge impact, and you're like, okay, I can just go down this strange avenue, and then at the end of these 2 days or 2 weeks, I can just move on, and I haven't bet the house on it, sort of thing. And that kind of those experiments, that those end up being where you do find really cool ideas.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's come across very well with Crawl, and I'm very happy
Thanks.
for it. I gotta say, there's not a lot of like offline co-op games out there. So when I saw Crawl, I'm like, oh my God, someone's actually thinking about like like couch games and like
Yeah.
actually having your friends and play. Oh God, that's so rare. I think the last time I
Well, that
did
was
that was like God, a GoldenEye or something.
that was a big moment for me. Was I had just bought, I can't remember what game it was now, but it was a racing game, and I was all excited to play to race my little brother. I was really busy. I didn't have much time in the day, and so a racing game is really great. You just sit down, you play a few races, you put it down. There's no sort of complex learning or anything. It's just satisfying game. And I wanted to play against my little brother, and I got this game and I plugged it in and realized that there was no split screen. I was like, what? How can you make a racing game with no split screen? That's the point of a racing game. And
Oh,
and then I
God.
sort of looked into doing a LAN. It was a 360 game. I looked into that direct plug thing, but they were phasing that out, and the game didn't support that. And so I ended up having to bring my little brother and his 360 and his TV out to my room, and so we're sitting next to each other on two 360s on two TVs, and we're still connecting, like we're still both connecting over the internet to connect to each other with all the lag and crap of the internet. And so yeah, that was definitely a really frustrating point when I was like, man,
Wow.
why aren't people making local multiplayer stuff?
Oh God, I know. Yeah, and there was another game. I think it was, of course, it's a smaller game, but 7 Days to Die. I bought purposely on the PS4 to play with my girlfriend and then my, brother online, and it just didn't have like that one little thing that seems so simple, like that you could do that. It just didn't work out. But
Yeah.
yeah, you see that a lot with games, and I'm just happy to see offline co-op, and it should be. Oh,
And I mean,
Battlefront. Battlefront was another big thing. Oh, they you could only have two players. That's what it was. So it felt like
okay.
so hollow and everything. I'm like, really? There's easily two other players could play this, and oh
Yeah.
man.
I mean, and that's something that I think we've benefited from sort of a lot with Crawl, because a lot of the fun people are having when they're playing Crawl is not made by the game at all. It's just made by people having fun with their buddies. And so people are like, oh yeah, I had a really great time. just because they had a joke and a mess around with their friends, and so we get kind of lucky at getting some of the credit for that.
Yeah, and I think having that is kind of like also I just have to mention the boss of Gabe Newell. I mean, that's just brilliant. Oh man, I loved that video that you put up there, and had the whole letter and everything. Oh, that was brilliant. I loved that so much.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, that's just the sort of stuff that I think, when I was younger, like a friend of mine would go away for the weekend, and I'd think, oh, what's a funny little animation that I can make to entertain him when he gets back. And
Right.
he'd get back, and I'd show him a stupid thing, but it would all just be like some private joke between me and him, and he'd think
Right.
it was funny. But so this thing of directly interacting with people on Twitter means that like I can make a stupid joke, but I can make it with like all of the people on Twitter and all of the people who follow us, and have this
Right.
like really fun, silly, jokey interaction that I used to just have, as a target kind of audience of just this one friend of mine, and now is kind of sharing with heaps of people. And yeah, that's really rewarding, sharing just such a dumb joke with everyone. And then there's also the side that like that gets shared around and people like it, and it's like, holy shit, this is like a legitimate thing that I did for my business.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And I see that in Crawl because I mean, just you can put the smallest thing in there and people are going to reference that thing and it'll end up right back at you. And you're like, oh yeah, that's my game. Yeah, that's right. That's what's so great about again, back to the community, but
Yeah, no. And so getting to just be like an internet joke idiot, like professionally as a thing
Right.
that's like a legitimate part of your job is really, really fun.
Oh yeah, of course. And I think that's what works so well in these independent games, So I thank you guys so much for doing this and doing the podcast with me. And
Yeah, no
it's
worries. It's
a lot of
fun.
fun. It's a new thing that I'm trying to put out there. I want to interview more people and get it out there just to show people how fun game development is and who that they're actually made by humans and
Yeah.
I just want to get more into that. So
Yeah, well,
I really
it's
thank you guys.
definitely, it's definitely great to spread that because, I think both mine and Dave's story were like, yeah, we didn't think, we never thought of it as a thing that people made. And so we didn't even try to get into it until we lucked into it, just because that information wasn't out there. I wasn't seeing footage of guys making games as their job. So yeah, I think it's great to be spreading that stuff around now.
Yeah, and I hear so many people saying like, I used to be really into, I want to be a film director, and so many people are like, oh yeah, film directing, I guess
Yeah.
people make, movies. And so that was my whole entire idea about game development, I'm like, I've always been a huge fan of games, and I think Double Fine was one of the first to show me like, oh God, like real people make these games. And so that's what got me so
Yeah.
excited about it. And I'm like, I want to do this. These are the type of people I want to be around. Forget the movie stuff. This is more me.
Yeah.
And so, this is kind of this podcast here is kind of my 2 cents. To put
Yeah,
in.
awesome.
So I'm really happy to have you guys on, and it's great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to whatever else you guys come up with or updates on Crawl. So
Yeah, thanks.
but thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right, cheers.